Well, I think campaign finance needs overhaul from top to bottom. It's certainly eye-opening to run for office and see how corporate money flows into the campaigns of candidates running for office. But it's not going to happen from Congress. You've got Congress, it's like the fox is guarding the chicken coop. And the Supreme Court's made it clear they're not going to deal with it either. It's up to Kansas voters to decide we're not going to elect people that behave this way. I don't accept corporate funding now. I won't accept it after this election. I won't accept it any time in the future.
Ms. Jenkins?
Well, just to clarify, nobody should be accepting corporate money or they'll be in jail because it's illegal to accept corporate money. But my response is simply transparency and, you know, an open and honest, fair government is the way to go. And right now, every campaign contribution that we get is reported in a timely fashion for every American to go take a look at. And you know, I think that's the best way to do it. If you can go online and see who is supporting candidates of your choice or candidates that you're, you know, in opposition to, and make up your mind. What I do not support is something like the Disclose Act, which came before Congress earlier this year, which has started making different rules for different sets of people, disallowing corporations from participating in the democratic process, but allowing unions to participate. You know, we shouldn't be making different rules for different sets of people. We need to level the playing field, make it open and transparent, and let the voters decide.
The 2nd Kansas congressional district benefits hugely from agriculture, Ms. Jenkins. Some would say it also benefits from lots of undocumented workers. Should there be a path to citizenship for undocumented workers laboring in the fields of the 2nd congressional district?
Ag is certainly a huge part of the 2nd district and the economy here in Kansas. However, most Kansans, whether they're in ag production or some other field, understand the difference between folks that obey the law and folks that break the law. And most Kansans don't support breaking the law. So I firmly stand in opposition to amnesty. Certainly we need to address the issue of illegal immigration. I'm very disappointed that Republicans had an opportunity to do it at the federal level, did nothing. Democrats have had an opportunity to do something about it. They have done nothing. And that's why we see a situation in Arizona arise where the state has had to tackle it itself, and I am in full support of what Arizona is doing. We need to address this. We need to secure the border now, and then we need to give businesses the tools that they need to be that second line of defense. They're coming here for jobs. They're not coming here because we're charming. And so if we can give them the tools that they need to be that second line of defense, I think we can address this in short order. But the federal government, it's their responsibility to act, and I'm very disappointed that it has not been addressed.
Cheryl Hudspeth, where do you stand on this issue?
Well, the estimates are that 50% of the agricultural workers in this country are undocumented workers. And everybody knows it, and the employers know it, and the subcontractors know it. The employers have a responsibility to verify. They have this responsibility, and they would rather not deal with it because it drives the cost up. So we all have to come to terms with what it really costs, who's going to do this work, who's going to pay, how much do you want to pay for a head of lettuce, how much do you want to pay for a loaf of bread. I was in Mound City. I was in Sam Brownback's hometown, and this woman asked me quite sincerely, so what can I do now? And I said, every contractor, subcontractor that comes on your ranch, you make sure that they have verified the immigration status of everybody that comes on your property. The buck starts there.
You're watching the major party candidates for the Kansas 2nd congressional district race. You've been getting questions from the League of Women Voters compiled by our debate sponsors. We've also been selecting questions from our audience, and we're going to go to those right now. Beginning with you then, to the Democratic candidate Cheryl Hudspeth. The World Trade Organization is putting pressure on the United States to eliminate agricultural subsidies. Do you support that idea?
Oh, well, there's so many different kinds of subsidies and incentives. There's no level playing field. Are we going to drop our agriculture subsidies? Not today.
Are there any you would support?
It's too complex. I don't think you can start taking the string out of this thing without the whole garment unraveling. You have to look at the whole garment.
Ms. Jenkins.
Well, certainly the first thing we need to do is level the playing field. You are going to have an opportunity to look at the Farm Bill and look at subsidies and programs when that is up for debate in a year or two, and we will be doing that given the economics of the day. We need to address that, but certainly once again, those many of the subsidies are the safety net for the folks that are providing the world's food source, and that is something that we can't turn our back on, especially when there is not a level playing field. Additionally, we need to expand trade agreements sooner than later. You know, I heard the president say in his State of the Union address back in January that he was going to accomplish this. You know, here we are in mid-October. It's not been done yet. We need to do that and give our ag producers here in the state of Kansas an opportunity to compete in other markets.
I'm being handed these little handy-dandy note cards from members of the audience. Here's another question, starting with you, Ms. Jenkins. Should the United States continue to offer military aid to Israel?
I believe we've got a friend in Israel, maybe one friend, a good ally in the Midwest or the Mideast region, and that is Israel. And to turn our back on them now, I think would be a shame. There's a real hotbed over there right now. We're concerned about Iran and what they're capable of doing. Sanctions that we passed earlier this year appear to be working, but certainly haven't solved the problem entirely. So yes, I think we need to support our ally, Israel.
Ms. Hudspeth?
Well, I think we're always going to stand by Israel. The question is how close we stand and whether or not we create any room for disagreement. I'm really pleased that this administration has made some really clear signs to Israel that there are lines that we will not cross. There are also lines with our other economic partners in the Mideast, the Saudis and others, that we also it's to all of our best interest that we stabilize this region. But no, we're not going to walk away from Israel. That's not going to happen in my lifetime.
Or if you're elected to Congress. Okay, Ms. Hudspeth, another question from our audience. How do you feel about the Tea Party's role in the elections?
Well, they've certainly jazzed the joint up. I think it's very interesting. I have conversations with people. They're very firm in their beliefs. I don't share all of their beliefs. I think they're good intentioned. But yeah, it sure has made it a much more interesting election than the same old.
How do you size up the Tea Party movement in this election, Ms. Jenkins?
Well, I think they've brought great excitement to this election cycle, and I've been to many of their events across the 2nd District, and I'm always amazed. These are real people. You know, these are mamas with babies in strollers. They're college students, they're businessmen and women, they're retirees, and they're fighting mad at the direction that this majority in Congress is going. And they, you know, I hear them say it every day, they're not going to take it anymore. They're going to take their country back. They believe in many of the things that I believe: a balanced budget, low tax, reducing this out-of-control national debt. And so, you know, I think while they are a diverse group, they're going to be making a huge impact, you know, not only here in Kansas, but across the nation.
Our audience members are real people too, and one real-life audience member wants to know from you, would you support legislation to increase wind energy production?
I support an all-of-the-above approach to energy. We had an alternative bill on the Republican side of the aisle when we had the cap-and-trade discussion over a year ago, and our bill, you know, addressed the need to cease being reliant on foreign sources of oil by drilling now with the resources that we have. In addition to that, conservation was a part of it, and certainly wind, solar, nuclear, all those things that we have right here in the great state of Kansas. But what I know won't work is this horrid piece of legislation, one of the worst that I've seen in my short time, and that's the cap and trade bill. And I would be interested to know where Cheryl stands on the cap and trade bill. This would be devastating for ag production, expensive for those of us that live in the heartland, and most folks are expecting it to come up in the lame duck session. So we are, all eyes are on that issue.
Well, Cheryl Hudspeth, you have 90 seconds. It's on wind power, but if you also want to broaden it to cap and trade, you're free to do so.
Well, first of all, let me say that Kansas has great wind potential that we can put to work right away. We also have great solar potential. We also have an abundant supply of natural gas, which is a much lower carbon emission fuel than oil or coal. And we need to have a national energy policy that moves the agenda forward to get these things online, that are clean, reliable sources of domestic energy production. Cap and trade's dead. It's been dead for some time. Cap and trade was, by the way, a Republican alternative to other approaches to deal with carbon emissions. But the bill's dead. They just keep bringing this up. It's a red herring, as they say. What we don't have is a realistic national energy policy that moves us off of our dependence on foreign oil that keeps exporting our wealth to the Middle East. We need to get that done.
There is so much concern about Social Security, this audience member asks. Will you pledge to vote against any legislation that cuts benefits, increases the retirement age, or privatizes Social Security?
Absolutely, unequivocally.
All of those?
Yes,
you would
sir.
never do any of those things? Okay.
We need to strengthen the formula. The formula is 75 years old. It needs to be adjusted. Our longevity is increased. Our cost of medical care is increased. We need to adjust the formula. This program has reduced poverty among the senior population in this country from 50% to 10%. It is one of the most effective programs ever created by our government.
Ms. Jenkins?
I didn't catch the whole list. I'm against privatization of Social Security.
How about cutting benefits?
And look, we are not going to break promises to our senior citizens.
So if you're reelected, no increasing the retirement age either, Ms. Jenkins, as part of the question?
We are not going to break promises to the senior citizens. They have worked too long and hard for that and have relied on it, and we have made those promises, and that's why I'm very disappointed to hear under President Obama that we're not giving them an increase this year. He's just announced there will be no increase next year. Claims their costs haven't gone up. I haven't talked to one senior citizen who hasn't felt an increase in their costs. And this wouldn't even be a problem if members of Congress had left their hands out of the cookie jar. And so the first thing we need to do is figure out a way to restore those funds, not by raising taxes. We don't have a revenue problem. We need to address the spending side of the ledger, balance the budget, restore that fund so that we don't have to cut benefits.
Ms. Jenkins, what steps would you take, if re-elected, to increase bipartisanship in Congress? 90 seconds.
Well, I think the first thing we do is stop locking committee doors, as Speaker Pelosi has been known to do, and perhaps invite people to the table. One of my major disappointments in being a freshman in the House was showing up on day one, wide-eyed and eager to work with the majority party, and learning that when you're 75 to 80 votes down, your opinion is not welcome. You don't have a seat at the table, and committee rooms were locked. So I think Republicans, I don't know if they operated the show that way when they were in charge, but if they did, shame on them. I can guarantee you they're older and wiser these days, and the majority that I intend to work with will be the grown-up, and we will be the ones to go first and change the tenor in Washington. I think there wasn't one major piece of legislation in my whole first term that ever came to the floor under regular order. That means the Speaker chose not to obey the rules of the House. She said, we're going to do it our way this time. You're not able to offer amendments unless I tell you you can. You're not able to debate a point unless I tell you you can. I think House Republicans, if taking back the majority, will change the tone of Washington, and legislation will rise and fall on the merits of the legislation. Everyone will have a voice, an opportunity to speak for their constituency. That's why we're there. If it's a great idea, it'll pass. If not, it will fail. So I'm eager for that day.
Now, if you're elected, Ms. Hudspeth, what would you do to help increase bipartisanship in Congress?
Well, Ms. Jenkins has had 2 years to vote for reasonable bills that she's voted down over and over and over again. She's voted against unemployment benefits. She's voted against teachers. She's voted against small business tax breaks. I can't think of anybody in this district she hasn't voted against because she is aligned on one side of the field with her team. I'm going to be aligned with the people of the 2nd District of Kansas. That's my vow. I don't have major party support. I don't have these big dollars floating in. I don't owe my allegiance to anybody other than the people of this district.
What taxes, if any, would you consider increasing?
Well, you know, we went into 2 wars, and for the first time in the history of this nation, we said, not only aren't we going to raise your taxes so that you can support this effort, this national cause, we're going to give you a tax cut too. So if you want to know what that deficit is, it's 2 wars. It's 10 years of military spending. So we got to get out of this hole. We have to raise some tax revenue. We have to do some spending cuts. We must extend the tax breaks for the middle class right now because our economy needs it. I'm saying that I would increase taxes for the richest 2% of the people that live in this district. 2%. They can do that. Other people can't. I'm asking them to do it. I'm saying, put your money on the line. This is our nation. These are our wars. Help us pay for them.
Ms. Jenkins.
I have pledged not to raise any taxes. There is no need to raise taxes. When you look at the way that the federal government has grown exponentially, the wasteful spending that has been the norm since Nancy Pelosi has taken the gavel, you quickly realize you don't need to raise taxes. You just need to roll back some of this ridiculous spending. And in addition to that, we need to focus on just balancing the budget. I mean, we have seen these last 2 years deficits well over $1 trillion in both cases. We're on a trajectory that cannot be sustained. All of that can be taken care of by looking at the spending side of the ledger. You know, Cheryl keeps mentioning the military spending, but you know, the interest on our debt alone is going to outpace our entire military budget in just a matter of a few short years. So that's not the problem. The problem is all of this other wasteful spending that's going on. And, you know, she mentions that I have voted against this group or that group or what have you. I have. While there are lots of good ideas, unless the majority in Congress wants to pay for them by finding an offset, something to cut, I'll continue to vote no, because Kansans know you have to pay for the things that you're enjoying today.
Lots of questions from our audience about foreign policy. Here's another one. What specific course of action do you support, Congresswoman Jenkins, in regards to Iran's nuclear intentions?
Well, we passed a bill earlier this year, a sanctions bill, and I think at this point we're waiting to see the results of that. But all indications, early indications are that that is making some impact. But we don't want to let this fella come up for air. I mean, we certainly need all eyes on the situation there.
Ms. Hudspeth?
Well, I agree. I think the sanctions are working. I think the president's on the right track. But let's face it, we also have them surrounded on all sides. Our military forces have completely surrounded this country. And now we're closing them off with our allies to the north. How much are we going to spend on this project? And is it going to assure us the outcome? These are questions we have to ask. I think they need to be disarmed. I think the Pakistanis need to be disarmed. But I don't know that we're going to continue to get to our goal by increasing our military presence there.
Should Congress put pressure on the president to try the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay?
You know, that is such a mess. I don't really care how they handle it. They need to get the job done and get it over with. Just resolve it. It doesn't matter to them. I don't think it matters to us. It's very expensive to try them. I have absolute faith that our judicial system can handle this. And it has. They've had more success in trying the prisoners and terrorists in our judicial system than they have had in the military justice system. Whatever it is, get the job done, get it resolved, and let's move on.
What's your view on that, Ms. Jenkins?
Well, I'm just relieved that we were able to keep the Guantanamo Bay detainees out of the 2nd District. As you know, that might have been the first piece of legislation that I introduced on day 2 or 3 that I was in Congress. There was a real threat of those detainees being moved right here to Fort Leavenworth on post. And we were able to work with the administration and educate the administration on why that was the wrong place to bring the detainees. His promise, the president's promise to close Guantanamo Bay by the end of last year, obviously, has come and gone. And I'm just interested to see at this point, you know, how he wants to proceed. He's got his eyes on another location and determined to bring them here. I'm just relieved that it's not going to be Kansas.
I'm pleased you answered that way, because the last question I have here, in terms of legislation, what would be the first item you would sponsor or co-sponsor in this new session of Congress, Ms. Jenkins?
Well, if we don't address the issue of taxes by the end of the year, which I'm afraid we might not. I think we'll be staring down a $4 trillion increase at the beginning of the year. And despite Cheryl's claim that we've got red herrings, these are real threats. Cap and trade, a VAT tax, amnesty, all of these things Speaker Pelosi can bring up in a lame duck session when those people are no longer accountable to the people that they represent. They've been fired. So there's a real threat. So if that's not done, job one would be to fix the tax situation, because as I suggested earlier, businesses are paralyzed right now, not knowing how to proceed because they don't know what tax structure in place. They don't know what the death tax is going to be. So once that's done, you know, then we can move to some more interesting things like, you know, balancing the budget and cutting some things. So it would be like taxes first.
Cheryl Hudspeth, it's January, and you've just been sworn in as the new Kansas 2nd District Congresswoman. What's the first thing that you do?
I think we need to address national energy policy in a way that partners with private business, with investors. We need to get people back to work, creating jobs that keep our money in our country, providing good jobs for people instead of exporting our money and importing fossil fuels. This is a winner for Kansas. This is a winner for the 2nd District. And we should be doing this right now. It has the ability to have a positive economic input, not just on the 2% of the richest people in this district, but on the entire 100% of the people that live in this district.
That is it for our questions. I do have other audience member questions. I don't have time to get to them, but 10 out of 10 for legibility on these. These have been excellent. We have closing statements now. Both candidates agreed to allow 3 minutes for closing statements. And based on the coin toss, Cheryl Hudspeth, the Democrat candidate for this Kansas 2nd Congressional District seat, goes first.
Thank you very much. You know, this election is not about Nancy Pelosi. Lynn Jenkins has brought Nancy Pelosi's name up at least 10 times. Nancy Pelosi does not live in Kansas. She is not running for this congressional seat. This is an election about two people that voters need to decide who's going to best represent their interests. It's not about Nancy Pelosi. It's about creating a Congress that can act and move this country forward in our common good, in our best interest. It's not about lining up on different sides of the football field. It's about cooperation. Cooperation between both sides of the aisle, cooperation between business and government, cooperation that works to create policies and programs that put Kansans to work so they can feed their families and provide for them and educate them and afford to turn the lights on. That's the number one thing that's going on. And yes, there's uncertainty. And I'll tell you what, the uncertainty in the business community is not caused by the tax policy. The uncertainty in the business community is based on one thing only, whether they're going to have enough consumer demand for them to stay in business and sell their products, whether they're going to have enough consumer demand to be able to hire people and provide decent wages and decent health benefits for those employees. And we're not going to have demand as long as Congress is deadlocked, when they go home for recess without passing the budget, when they go home and leave the military in Afghanistan and Iraq without a defense budget. That's irresponsible behavior. That's not what we paid them to do. This is a race about Lynn Jenkins and Cheryl Hudspeth. This is a race about the people of the Kansas 2nd District and about whether we can afford to send our kids to school, whether we can afford the health care we all need, whether we can stay in our homes this winter and keep warm. These guys have behaved irresponsibly over and over and over again. She had every opportunity to vote for bills that were good for Kansas, but she didn't. She followed the leader. She took sides. That's part of the problem. I'm not part of the problem. I want you to send me to Congress so I can be part of the solution for Kansas. Thank you very much.
Republican Lynn Jenkins, it's now time for you to make your final case to the voters.
Well, thank you again to KTWU, the League of Women Voters, and to Cheryl for this opportunity to discuss the issues. Debate and disagreement is healthy for the democracy, and forums like this are so important to voter education. Too often, it seems, folks become frustrated with politics because they don't believe there are any clear distinctions between the candidates. Today, it's crystal clear that there are huge differences between myself and my opponent. Over the past 2 years, I have voted no to every government bailout, no to the wasteful stimulus plan, and no to President Obama's government-run health care. While I voted no to these big government ideas, I was actively involved in crafting alternative solutions at every turn. Solutions based on authority granted to the federal government by the Constitution. My opponent, on the other hand, wholeheartedly supports virtually every piece of this liberal and irresponsible agenda. An agenda that I believe is out of step with the needs and the concerns of Kansans. The bailouts, the earmarks, the stimulus, and the government-run health care are burying our nation under a mountain of unsustainable debt. If this continues, we will be the first generation of Americans to have left our children worse off than our parents left things for us. I simply will not stand for continuing policies that I believe are making it harder for the next generation to achieve the American dream. In my short time in Congress, I have strived to be a leading voice for a balanced budget, lower taxes, and limited government. I've supported policies that bring jobs back to Kansas and bring certainty to employers and employees. But my job is not only to be your voice in Congress, it is also to serve you. And I have made it a priority to listen to you at numerous town hall meetings in all 26 counties of the 2nd District. I take great pride in responding to your letters, guiding casework through Washington's red tape, and hosting events to ask folks how I can be helpful. Today, I humbly ask you for your vote. Now more than ever, we need folks in Washington who will pledge to reduce government spending, reduce the tax burden, and reduce government's reach.
And that is where I do have to stop you, Ms. Jenkins. Just in terms of the rules of this debate, the time is up. That is it. That is all we have time for on this forum. You have been watching the two major party candidates jockeying for your vote in the race for the Kansas 2nd Congressional District, Republican Lynn Jenkins and Democrat Cheryl Hudspeth. Our thanks tonight to our debate sponsor, the League of Women Voters, who devised the format and guided our questioning. I'd like to thank our audience. I'm Nick Haynes from everyone at KTWU Public Television in Topeka. Thanks for spending part of your evening with us. Good night.